Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. Your front row seat to the battle for New York's next mayor. It's the old guard clinging to power, chasing a candidate they never saw coming. Every night, our experts break it down.
What New Yorkers want above all else is authenticity.
We're listening to the people who matter most, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E. Cupp, that's your perception. Of course, there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It's Tuesday, October 21st, and we're just 14 days or 2 weeks away from this all-important New York City mayoral race. Later in today's show, we're going to talk with a former congressman about his take on this race and its impact on national politics. We all know that this is not happening in a vacuum. Washington's paying attention. The whole country's paying attention. But first, as always, let's get to some news. Joining me now is Chris Sommerfeldt, the senior City Hall reporter for the New York Daily News. Welcome back, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Okay. Let's start with what is feeling like a really hard push to get Curtis Sliwa to drop out of this race. I was on Fox 5 New York this morning. It's all anyone was talking about. Tell us about your report on John Catsimatidis and Sid Rosenberg and what they said about Sliwa getting out of the race.
Yeah, keep in mind for anyone who might not be familiar with those two names, John Catsimatidis and Sid Rosenberg, these are longtime friends and supporters of Curtis Sliwa, who now, as the race is coming to a close, are essentially saying, buddy, we love you, but please drop out of the race. We don't think you have a path, and we think you're harming Andrew Cuomo's chances at being able to defeat Zohran Mamdani, who's the clear favorite at winning.
And it's not because they want, just to clarify, it's not because they support Andrew Cuomo necessarily. They just think Mamdani is that dangerous.
Exactly. They just see the field at this point as being a two-man race, which, if you look at the polls, that is accurate. It seems to be a race between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani, and in many people's view, Cuomo really doesn't have a path unless Curtis Sliwa bows out as well.
Additionally, the editorial boards of both the New York Post and the New York Daily News, where, full disclosure, I am a columnist, they're calling for Sliwa to drop out of the race too. Is this sort of unprecedented in your years of covering New York City elections for two papers of record in the city to call one candidate to drop out?
I think it is unprecedented. I think there's many things that are unprecedented with this election, though. As you know, in a New York City general election, in a mayoral race, you usually see the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee, and then maybe a low polling independent candidate. And this year, though, we have the former governor of the state running as an independent candidate. That's unprecedented, to put it mildly. I think, though, to zoom out a little bit here, I don't really think there's a chance that Curtis is going to drop out of the race. He's made clear again and again and again that I'm staying in no matter what. And also keep in mind that early voting starts on Saturday.
Right.
So if he's going to drop out, I guess he would have to do that before
he would
Saturday.
still be on the ballot, as we know. The New York Republican county chairs also issued a statement in support of Sliwa today. They said Republican voters are not going to vote for Andrew Cuomo. He's the father of disastrous bail reform, a disgraced former governor who had to resign on the eve of his impeachment, and a man facing sexual harassment allegations. He lost his own party's primary badly and is not even appearing on the ballot on a major party line. Republicans should not have to clean up the mess Andrew Cuomo and the Democrats created, and we will not allow the political class to interfere with voters or hijack our ballot. Chris, couple things in there. Do they have a point that it should not be Curtis Sliwa's job to make this race easier for Andrew Cuomo? Two, there are Republicans in New York City. I know there's not a lot. I used to be one, but they've elected Republican mayors and governors before. Is there some truth in this sort of pushback from the Republicans in New York?
I think there certainly is, in the sense that there was a Democratic primary and Zohran Mamdani won it. You know, the tradition in New York has always been Democrats, like Andrew Cuomo, line up behind the nominee once the primary is over. Once the dust has settled from the primary, you move on, you endorse the Democratic nominee, and you move on to the general. So I do think the Republican chairs, kind of like looking historically at New York City elections, they do have a point there. And I think Curtis Sliwa very much feels that same way, that it's not in his interest to try to help Andrew Cuomo, a man that he has railed against for a very long time on various issues.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, Chris, if you think to voters, it looks a little like Andrew Cuomo's got to rig it to win it, right? Like he already was able to elbow Eric Adams out to get him to drop out. Now he's trying to get Curtis Sliwa to drop out. There was a Democratic primary. He lost. How are voters seeing his kind of, chicanery, these moves?
I do think that it's a very unfortunate political situation for Andrew Cuomo to be in. It doesn't look good that he's having to focus on campaigning to get other candidates out of the race instead of campaigning to actually get his message out.
Chris, thanks so much for being here today and coming back on our program with your great reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and coming up next, a former Congressman, Steve Israel, is here to talk about politics and prose. That's next on Battleground NYC. We're back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Let's get back with more headlines and analysis. Joining me now for the bigger picture is Steve Israel, former New York Congressman, the director of the Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University, my alma mater. And he's a bookstore owner. He's author of the upcoming book, The Einstein Conspiracy. Just call him a regular Renaissance man. Welcome to the show, Steve Israel.
You are the only human being who's ever called me a Renaissance man, and I'm going to remember that forever. Thank you.
That cannot be true. You do so much. You do so much.
That is true. That is true.
We're going to get into the Stoics, I promise, as well, because I know
good.
that's it's got a lot of your attention. But let's start on this race. I've been dying to talk to you about this race for as long as we've been covering it. You know New York, right? And you know the challenges of the Democratic Party right now. So put into context for us the stakes for the Democratic Party if Zohran Mamdani, the front runner, wins.
Yeah. Well, look, New York has had some difficult times for Democrats. We have underperformed in congressional elections recently. You can't win a majority in the House of Representatives if you're Democrats without New York overperforming. And the race for New York City mayor, many are looking at this as a harbinger of what will happen in the midterm elections. Essie, for Democrats, there is only one thing that matters, and that is winning the midterm elections in 2026 and restoring checks and balances. Now,
Yeah.
I live on Long Island, and I will tell you, there are local elections in Nassau County and Suffolk County, and our mailboxes are practically tilting over from the heavy volume of mail from Republicans associating every Democrat with Zoran Mamdani. You would
Yeah.
think that we were New York City voters, but the
Right.
Republicans are trying to create this kind of guilt by association. If you're a Democrat, you love that guy.
Yeah.
And we're going to see one thing. If these local races are tighter, if Democrats are competitive, it means that the Mamdani effect wasn't that pronounced. If they're
Mm.
blowouts, it means that the Republicans may be onto something.
I think if Mamdani wins, and this isn't like a threat or a warning, I just think it's political reality, you're going to see his face on mailers in Texas, in Michigan,
Yeah.
in Georgia.
Well, you probably will. I'm not convinced yet that that face, those mailers, have much impact in a midterm election. I mean,
Mm.
if this becomes in Texas, in Georgia, more importantly, in those battleground swing states that Democrats must win to take the House, places like Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in those other
Yep.
competitive districts, if this is a referendum on Zoran Mamdani, then the Democrats are in trouble. If it's a referendum on Donald Trump, Democrats should do fine. And so the Democrats cannot allow this to be a referendum on him. And I would also say, the impact of this race, I think you have to put it in concentric circles of impact. Great impact in the suburbs of New York City, where you have a lot of swing voters. Less impact when you get out of the New York media market. And I'm
Hmm.
not sure it'll have much impact when you start to drift really far outside the New York media market.
Interesting. Okay, so if Mamdani wins, what would you tell Democrats are the lessons to take away? Is it, the strong social media game, the ground
Mm.
game, the authenticity, the focusing on policy issues? What should they learn since they can't run a progressive democratic socialist in every race around the country, as you know?
Well, you're exactly right. There are some key lessons that Democrats can win. What he has been able to do is create like nuclear energy in his
Mhm.
electorate.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a perfect storm. It was the concerns on the left, and I disagree with these concerns, but these concerns about U.S. policy towards Israel. It was the fact that Andrew Cuomo got out of the race, and you had a unique set of circumstances with Mayor Adams. So there
Yeah.
was this perfect storm. But Zoran was able to tap into that perfect storm. He turned the environment to his advantage, which is indispensable in winning an election.
Yeah.
He won it on the ground. He had really inventive, innovative digital strategies. He's a charismatic guy. I don't agree with him on many things, but you
Yeah.
cannot undervalue his charisma. And so I would take a look at his more mechanical operations, how
Yeah.
he was able to tap into those issues and exploit them.
Yeah, good advice. For Andrew Cuomo, you and I know this. He didn't want to be doing this. He wanted to be running for president. He didn't think he would be running for mayor of New York City. His future and star were very bright inside the Democratic Party. What do you make of his, political comeback attempt?
Well, look, Andrew Cuomo has not 9 lives, maybe 90 lives. This is a guy, he's a survivor, man. This guy just
Mhm.
comes back. I remember in 2002 when he primaried the New York State Controller, Carl McCall, for governor. And that was supposed to be the end of his career for taking on Carl McCall. He withdrew from that primary. I remember meeting with him on several occasions. I was in Congress at the time to talk about
Mhm.
his future. And he said, "Look, I've learned some my own lessons from that experience. I'm going to do things a little differently." Then he becomes governor after all, and then he dominates the national media market,
Yeah.
and then he resigns, and he's coming back now. It's very
Mm.
possible he's going to win this mayoral primary. 90 lives, not 9.
Wow. Okay, and then I need to ask you what you make of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and their refusal to endorse Mamdani so far. I mean, they've got 2 weeks to do it, but this is obviously they have slow walked this. What do you make of that?
Well, as you know, politics, particularly at the leadership level, is about balancing different interests and equities. Uh, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have their own constituencies, and their
Yeah.
constituents are their members, and they've got to
Yeah.
protect their members.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense. I just look at Zoran Mamdani, not someone I would vote for, but I look at him
Mhm.
as one of the bright spots in the Democratic Party where there aren't a bunch of bright spots. I don't know. I might go ahead and hitch my wagon. But You know more than me, Steve. And so I've got lots more questions for you after the break. Don't go anywhere. More Battleground NYC right after this. We're back with Battleground NYC, again with Steve Israel, former New York Congressman, director of the Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University, author of the upcoming book, The Einstein Conspiracy. And I can't wait to talk to you about that, Steve. But first, I want to broaden our conversation out a bit. As you know, everyone's watching this race. We just talked about that a little. Um, Whoever wins is going to have to contend with President Trump. And President Trump has already been threatening New York City and other blue cities around the country. That's going to make it really tough for the next mayor, but especially tough for someone like Zohran Mamdani, who really has very little experience working with Trump or running something as big as New York City. What advice would you give to him?
You know, President Trump, he likes a foil. The way he operates, he's got to have, somebody that he can rail against. I think that President Trump he wouldn't be shedding tears if Zoran won this race because he'd have somebody to campaign against and rail
I know
against.
what you mean. Yeah,
You know what I mean, right?
I do.
The other thing is Trump, he respects strength.
Hmm.
And when he sees somebody who has figured out how to win an election against the odds and projects that strength, I think he has a healthy respect for that person. So it wouldn't shock me to see Trump trying to find ways of, on the one hand,
Yeah,
railing against Mondami, but on the other hand, figuring out how to work with him. Also, there's a lot of real estate in New York City that President Trump would want to protect, and he would want to have a decent relationship with the mayor.
there you go. I think you're absolutely right. There's something to that. Um, as you know, there's a growing call for more establishment Democrats to step aside and make room for younger candidates. We've had a lot of them on this show. Some Democrats, like Jerry Nadler, seem to get that message, or maybe he was, told that message. Others do not seem to get it, whether that's 88-year-old Eleanor Holmes Norton saying she is not going anywhere, 87-year-old Maxine Waters saying she's run again in 2026. Republicans are doing this too, but you're here, so I'm talking about Democrats. Put it this way: there are 50 members of Congress age 75 and older up for re-election next year. And of those, 70% say they are running again, and 70% are Democrats. Is the party getting this call for real change?
Well, the party's leadership in Congress has changed. Nancy Pelosi stepped aside. Jim
Yeah.
Clyburn stepped aside. Steny Hoyer. I mean, they were in leadership for a long time. They stepped aside for a new generation. Hakeem Jeffries and Susan Del Bene, Pete Aguilar, Catherine Clark, and others. Look, SC, I made my own decision after 16 years to
Yeah,
leave in rare form, unindicted and undefeated.
that's
I
right.
felt that there does come a time when you have to have kind of a replenishing of energy. Democrats right now are seeing something remarkable, and that is they're seeing amazing energy on the streets. Most of it is young energy, and so I think that they
Yeah.
have to tap into it and embrace it.
And you know, whether you're a progressive or a moderate, if you're looking at someone like Zohran Mamdani, or maybe it's Graham Plattner in Maine, or maybe it's Omar Fattah in Minneapolis,
Hmm.
are you thinking the answer is more young candidates, or is it a message for younger
Yeah.
voters?
Look, I have a different view of things. I think it's just being able to tap into the anxieties of voters. I don't care whether you're 25 years old or 65 years old.
Yeah.
You need to be talking about the concerns of voters, and that's the economy and its jobs and its paychecks and its manufacturing, and it's how do we rebuild the American dream, which has become an American nightmare. It's not about age, it's about resonating with voters.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I was just interviewing Rahm Emanuel for
Ah,
another show, and he said the exact same thing. The American
mhm,
dream is gone. It's become a nightmare.
that's right.
And the Democrat who can speak to that will capture the nation.
Mhm.
To that point, are Democrats looking ahead to 2028? Are they in a good position, do you think, to field a good bench?
Well, I think yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have a very wide bench initially, but right now the game is 26. They've got to win the midterm
Yeah.
election if there's any hope of creating any kind of checks and balances and building towards a good presidential. It's in 26. And by the way, this happened
Yeah.
in 16, Trump wins, 18, the Democrats win over 40 seats, take the majority, and then they elect a Democrat president in 2020. They've got to repeat that cycle.
Are they in a good position to do that in time for 2026? Do they have a national agenda that they can present that unites progressives and moderates?
I don't think they need a national agenda. They need an agenda that
Okay.
works in the 15 to 25 competitive districts. You know, what works in Brooklyn, New York doesn't work in Brooklyn, Iowa. So I'm not
Yep.
interested in a national agenda. I want
Mm.
candidates and messaging that works in the 25 or 30 competitive districts that will decide the House majority.
Do you wish you were back at the DCCC right now?
You know, every gray hair on this head is because of DCCC. So no, thank you. I'm fine. I'm a bookseller.
Perfect segue. When we come back after the break, I want to talk to you about that, about your new book, and some other fun stuff. Don't go anywhere.
Thank
More
you.
Battleground NYC after this. We're back with more Battleground NYC. One more time with Steve Israel. Steve, tell me about your new book, The Einstein Conspiracy.
SCI left Congress after 16 years, not only because I thought it was time for somebody else to give it a shot, but also I didn't want to get trapped in the power and the sense of privilege. And my real passion has been writing. I've done two political satires. I spend my time selling books, and I decided not to write politics for my next novel.
Yeah.
I love these little quirks of history, these little ripples that create monumental events. And I learned about a letter that Albert Einstein wrote to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, warning him that the Nazis were developing an atom bomb and telling him we have to start our own program.
Mm.
I took that event and researched it for 2 years, and I've written an historic thriller about Einstein trying to warn Roosevelt while the Nazis are trying to do harm to Albert Einstein. It's called the Einstein Conspiracy. It launches on November 18th. I had such a fun time researching it and writing it. And it's just a fast paced historic thriller based on actual events.
Well, I love that. And people have a huge appetite for that. My friend
Yes.
Brad Thor, you might know,
Oh,
writes those books
hmm,
exclusively. He'll take a nugget, he'll be traveling overseas and he'll find a small story in like a
yeah.
Swiss newspaper. And then he'll write an entire cool thriller around it.
Yeah.
How'd you get this
Same
particular
thing. I
inspiration?
literally stumbled on this little cottage on the east end of Long Island, where I have a house there, where Einstein wrote this letter, and I began thinking, well, what if he hadn't written that letter to FDR? What if Adolf Hitler had an atom bomb before the United States did? That one little letter, those few hundred words, changed history. I started reading about it and then read about how the Nazis were trying to do harm to Einstein. There was a very significant pro-Nazi movement in New York and on Long Island, and I
Yep.
put it all together.
Mm. Yeah, and I know this story lives in a time and place, but what parallels do you see, if any, between then and
Yeah.
what's going on now?
In the course of my research, I learned that Madison Square Garden held a pro-Nazi rally in February of 1939 that attracted 20,000 people saluting swastikas. I
Oh,
learned that this little community on Long Island called German Gardens, um, it's called also called Camp Siegfried, uh, had streets, literally. I'm not making this up. Literally, the streets were Adolf Hitler Street, Joseph Goebbels Street, or Goebbels
oh,
Street, um, and they would fly swastikas under American flags, and they would create stormtrooper opportunities and marches. So I put this all together: the place, what is happening, authoritarian movements, people not wanting to engage in supporting human rights and democracy abroad. Put it all in this tight kind of whodunit historic thriller.
I can't wait. I'm sad that there are parallels between what's happening today and
There are.
what happened then. Very
Mhm.
sad about that, but I know it will make for an interesting read. What I know you're very interested in the Stoics, as I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier in the show. What's one lesson or piece of advice you think everyone should carry with them from the Stoics?
So, I own this bookstore, Theaters Books in Oyster Bay. People are constantly coming in on the left and the right, and they're saying it's so horrible, it's so volatile, it's unprecedented. What do I do? And I read Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and others. Look, what Stoicism teaches us is there's nothing new. We've been through this before. You've
Yeah.
got to build a sense of resilience. You've got to treat obstacles as opportunity, and that's what I try and do. Transcend the headlines and have a sense of history and a sense of the future and how other great leaders through peril have been able to get us to a better future.
Well, speaking of the future, we both work with students at Cornell. We're trying to
Uh,
get them interested in politics and public service. And what's a thing that people might not expect about Gen Z that maybe gives you some hope for the future?
oh gosh, thank you for asking the question. Look, I'm going to be really blunt. I think my generation of policymakers have screwed things up about as much as any generation can.
Yeah.
I teach at Cornell because I believe the next generation, they're ready. They are critical thinkers. Not all of them, but they have a sense of what needs to be done. They look at me and they say, "Okay, you had your time. Get out of the way. Let us lead."
Yeah.
I'm investing my time in helping to develop the skills and the bipartisanship and the civility, the decency, the ability to meet in the center
Yeah.
in that next generation. So I'm optimistic about where they're going to take us.
Very quickly before we go, I'm just reminded of the class we taught
Yeah.
together. I guess lectured your class. And remember when the two kids played an early Zoran Mamdani ad, and we were both like, "That ad's terrible. That guy's going nowhere."
I
These
remember.
kids knew because they're onto something, and Zoran Mamdani is speaking to them.
I learn more from my students than they learn from me, and except when you came and taught. Where I mean, by the way, I hope you don't mind. You're coming back by popular demand. There are a lot of requests for you to come back next spring.
You don't have to. You don't have to do much to get me to come back to Cornell. Steve Israel, thanks so much. This was a
Thank you,
great
SC.
chat. Thanks for coming on. And that'll do it for us today. We're back with more Battleground NYC Monday through Friday. And don't forget about tomorrow night's big debate. We'll be on right after. So definitely tune into Battleground after the big debate for analysis and reporting.